Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here to do another 6 musical book tag, but this time I'm going to be doing the one originally created by McKenna from maakbooks. I will of course link her original down below, and basically I found out about this because McKenna, she was so sweet, and after she created her original tag, she realized that I had actually already created one. I will also put that in the description if you guys haven't seen that yet. She was so sweet about it, she apologized, said that she didn't realize that there was already an original one, so basically now we're doing each other's tags because we think more love for 6 the musical is always a wonderful thing. Number 1 is No Way. Name a book that you read a while ago, but that wouldn't let you forget it. And I'm going to go with Green Dolphin Street by Elizabeth Googe. I think that's how you say her last name. And depending on which country the book is published in, I think the title is slightly different. It's like On Green Dolphin Street or something like that. But I read this several years ago, and this is definitely a book that has stuck with me more than I thought it would. And even at the time I really enjoyed it, but I didn't realize it would have such staying power. And in this novel we primarily follow 2 sisters, Marianne and Marguerite. And Marianne is very, very plain, but she's very ambitious and clever. And then Marguerite is very sweet and beautiful. Both sisters actually get judged based on their appearances. And one of the main themes of this book is kind of like deconstructing that, or realizing that there is more to these 2 women than the society around them kind of thinks there is. But the main plot of this book happens because there's one man who both sisters are in love with, but he is only in love with one of them, and that is Marguerite, the beautiful one. So one day he writes to them or to their family asking for the hand in marriage of their daughter, but he messes up and he asks to marry the wrong sister. And he's living, I think, in the Australian outback at this point. So they send the daughter over to marry him, thinking that that is who he asked for. And he gets the shock of his life when he realizes what happened. Which, first of all, how do you mess up that bad? Like, honestly, especially in the time period this is set in, like, people primarily communicated through letters. So wouldn't you think you would be more careful about, like, proofreading, checking things? I mean, at least checking that you had written the name of the correct sister, but I don't know. Anyway, so that happens, but he goes through with it. The book follows their marriage. I think his name is William. It follows his marriage with Marianne and their life together and how their relationship changes and develops. And it also follows Marguerite back home and kind of what she chooses to do with her life after this happens. Because she doesn't know that this marriage was a mistake. She thinks that he actually chose to marry her sister. And it's about these 2 women and their relationship with each other and with the people around them, and it just has a lot of like really, I think, powerful messages. I do want to mention one thing about the content, or one possible thing. I mentioned that Marianne and William are living in the Australian outback, I think, for part of the book, and I don't actually remember how much of the indigenous population is a part of the story, and I feel like with books that were written a while ago and set during this time, that can sometimes be an issue, the way that they treat the indigenous populations or refer to them. I don't remember in particular how they were referred to because I did read this a while ago, but just be aware going into that there might be some language or actions that definitely would not be okay to write about today. But based on the parts I do remember, this book was just very powerful in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I love the way that this whole relationship mix-up is kind of resolved, or the way that the characters come to view it when they find out what happened. I just think it's handled in a really believable and mature way, and it's just really interesting. And it was one of those books where like I got completely sucked in. Like I would stop reading it and have to go and do something, and I would actually feel a little bit disoriented because the way the scenery and the setting and the characters and like the writing was just so immersive and atmospheric that I was not prepared to like return to the real world. That was a very long answer for that one. I promise they won't all be this long. Number 2 is Don't Lose Your Head, an unapologetic character who entirely emulates everything that they are and that they do. And for that one I'm going with Millie from Puddin' by Julie Murphy. This is the companion sequel to Dumplin', which I read and liked. This book I absolutely loved, and Millie is one of the reasons. She is one of the 2 main characters of this book, and we do meet her in Dumplin', and Millie is fat and she is happy with it. She is fine. She loves herself, she's confident, and she wants to be a newscaster. And so in this book it's really about her convincing her family, especially her mother, that she is happy the way she is, that she doesn't want to keep going to fat camp like her mother has been sending her to for basically since she was little. She wants to go to a journalism camp instead, and this book is about her like struggling to convince other people that she already loves herself the way she is, and it's so beautiful. Millie is such a wonderful character. Like I just want the world for her. She is so good and loving and smart and funny, and she's just, I just love her. And she's definitely unapologetic about who she is, about her body, about the fact that she loves her body, and also about the fact that being fat is not the most important thing about her. She has such big dreams and like these amazing talents and skills, and just I loved reading about her journey in this book. Number 3 is Heart of Stone, a character who's been through hell and back and is still fighting. And for that one I'm going with Dana from Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, and Dana is the protagonist of this book, and she is a black woman from, I think it's the 1970s in the United States, and one day she suddenly gets transported back in time to the antebellum South, and that is obviously an incredibly dangerous thing for her. And so this book is about when that keeps happening and the realization Dana has about why she was sent back. She ends up saving a little boy's life who turns out to be the son of the plantation owner who owns the land that she lands on basically when she gets transported back. And it's definitely very disturbing and upsetting in parts because of course it covers racism and slavery in that time period in the South. So it's definitely a hard read sometimes, but it is so powerful, and like Dana as a character is just so incredibly strong, and like the things, like the choices she has to make are just so difficult, and you just respect her so much. And this book just has a lot of really wonderful explorations of like moral questions and kind of the idea of like responsibility and like if people can really change and how much people can change. And I just think this novel was fantastic. I read it earlier this year and it was just incredible. Number 4 is Get Down, a book that ended up being so much better than the cover would suggest. And for this one I'm going with Archangel by Sharon Chin. I actually just talked about this in my most recent wrap-up. At the time of filming it's my most recent, so I will link that down below if you want to hear my full thoughts on it. But you guys might remember that I didn't unequivocally love this book. I did have some problems with it, especially near the end, but I had such a fun time reading it. Like the romantic relationship especially, and the character development of our two leads was just really incredibly well done. And this definitely is not my favorite cover. I don't know if you guys can see this. It is wild. It's one of those covers that I associate with like this very specific kind of like 80s sci-fi fantasy romance. I don't actually think this edition was from the 80s, but I feel like that's what it's kind of harkening back to. And they just went for it, man. Like in a way, I admire their commitment to the theme, because this cover also makes like no sense. Like the feather she's holding kind of makes sense, and this little like orb thing, I don't know where that came from. I mean, this cover really has nothing to do with the story, but it is definitely a dramatic choice. But I ended up really enjoying the book overall. Number 5 is All You Want to Do, a book that appears light and carefree, but deals with heavier and darker topics. And I'm actually going with another recent read for that one, and that is We Are the Perfect Girl by Ariel Kaplan. I also talk about this one in that wrap-up, but this ended up being my favorite book of the month. I just found it so powerful and so well written. This is a modern-day gender-swapped retelling of Cyrano de Bergerac, and our main character, Aphra, basically finds herself in the position of having to help her beautiful best friend win the heart of the guy that Aphra is also in love with. And like, you know, from the cover of this book and even kind of the synopsis, it looks like it's gonna be like a really like cute and funny kind of rom-com. And even though the summary does kind of hint at some of the more serious issues, like the fact that how is Aphra going to be able to do this when she also has feelings for this guy, and also the fact that there is some deception involved in this romantic relationship. So that is a serious topic. But kind of the overall feeling you get from this book is maybe like, oh, this is going to be kind of a cute high school romance with a couple of speed bumps along the way. And that's not all that this book is. I mean, there definitely is a really wonderful romance, and like the fun aspects of this book are definitely fun. Like this is not like a downer of a story overall. But I think that the underlying themes of this book are very serious and are handled in a really thoughtful and wonderful way. Like the idea of self-esteem and like self-worth and body image, especially in young teenage girls, I think is just handled so beautifully. Aphra, our main character, she's not known for being very attractive, as with the original Cyrano de Bergerac. And throughout the book you realize that she is really not as confident and sure of herself as she thinks she is, or as she pretends to be, because she thinks she's kind of moved past this, like this idea of like, I don't have to be conventionally attractive because I'm really smart and I'm really clever. You know, I don't have to worry about being pretty. I don't care about it anymore. And throughout the book you really realize that she's not quite as okay with herself as she thinks she is. And I think the way that is handled is just so sensitive and so thoughtful and just so powerful and moving. I mean, there are a couple of scenes in particular with between her and her therapist, which there's also really good depiction of therapy in this book. Like there are a couple of scenes between her and her therapist that are just like incredibly moving, and just seeing Aphra come to these realizations about like she thinks she's okay and sometimes she's not, And even with all of that serious stuff being handled, in addition to things like not judging people based on appearances, and again, especially girls, her and her best friend Bethany, and how people make assumptions about either of them based on their looks, and how that restricts women and people in general is just so beautifully done. But even with all of that, this is still a really fun book. Like, it does still really have some happy moments and funny moments. Like, the humor in this is so good and very like in line with what I like in books. This book was just wonderful, and I feel like whether you're looking for a contemporary that does handle really serious themes, or whether you're looking for something like cuter and happier and more fun, I think there is plenty of both of those in this book, and they're integrated really well in a way that I don't always see, and I loved it. And finally, number 6 is I Don't Need Your Love, a character who took control of a shitty situation and made something great out of it. And I'm gonna go with a book I have mentioned before, but I want to talk about it again because it perfectly fits this question, and it's also a perfect kind of cozy fall-winter read, and that is Cotillion by Georgette Heyer. And the character I'm talking about is Kitty, our protagonist, and basically like the premise of this book and the shitty situation of the question is the fact that when it opens, Kitty and her uncle, or her kind of guardian, he has told her that she has to marry one of his nephews. She's adopted, so they're not actually related, I don't think, or it's very distantly. She's told that she has to marry one of his nephews, or she doesn't get a penny of his wealth, and if she doesn't get his inheritance, then Kitty is destitute. So it's very unfair of her uncle to be holding this over her head like this, but that's what he decides to do. And so poor Kitty finds this out, and his nephews are like summoned to this house, and a couple of them propose to her very, very reluctantly and in a way that doesn't make her feel good at all. And it's just not a good experience for her. And it also turns out that the one nephew she might have been interested in accepting decided not to show up. Didn't care enough to show up and propose to her. So Kitty is pretty upset about this, and she decides that she's at least going to turn this situation into a fun time for her. So she gets together with another one of the nephews and basically sets up a fake engagement, and she's going to use this as cover to travel to London and have a great time and get pretty dresses for once in her life and go to parties and make friends and just have a wonderful time like she was never allowed to at her uncle's house. And it's wonderful. It is so good. There's a wonderfully done fake engagement trope that I just loved. The characters are just so good. The humor of this writing is excellent. And I just like really admire that Kitty had this really embarrassing thing happen to her, and she's like, well, you know what? I'm gonna get something good out of it. So I just really admire that in her. And this book is just such a wonderfully like cozy read. It's one of my comfort food rereads. I actually am in the mood to reread it again now that I've been talking about it, but I just loved it, and it definitely fits the question, I think. Okay, everybody, so that was McKenna's 6 musical book tag. I'm going to tag my co-creator, Hana from Snow White Reader, to do this one, and of course anybody else who would like to do it. And that goes for like both of our versions, by the way. If you like the questions, or if you like 6, or if you were just looking for a tag to do, please do it. I think both of us, when we were tagging people, we kind of just focused on people who had expressed like particular interest in 6, but there are lots of people I'd love to see do either of these tags, so please do them if you would like to. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!